Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, Executive Editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with the next in our series of Dave's Faves, my own personal favorite recordings, the things I just love to listen to. Now, doesn't everyone love Rachmaninoff's Paganini Rhapsody? I mean, isn't it just like the most wonderful thing in the world? It's certainly far and away, his finest work for piano and orchestra, I think. I mean, I really do. It doesn't put a foot wrong anywhere. And in addition to having one of the great tunes in the history of humanity that no figure skater can do a figure eight without, the 18th variation, it also has a sound that was new to Rachmaninoff. It has a sardonic sense of humor. I mean, humor was never Rachmaninoff's specialty, but this piece has it. And it's so inventive and so creative, and it's harder edged. It sounds almost like Prokofiev in places. It doesn't have all of that romantic slopping and heaving and sweating and panting, lovely as that is. I mean, there's nothing wrong with some good romantic, sloppy, heaving, panting stuff. Don't get me wrong, but I really, really like to hear that edge and that rhythm. It's so marvelous. And it's really concerto length. It's 25 minutes long, 23 minutes long. It's a very, very serious piece. And I don't see it played as much as it used to be. I don't know why. It deserves to be, for sure, probably because it's really a first half piece. And nowadays, when you do a big concerto, a lot of soloists and conductors like to put it all by itself on the second half of the concert. And this just wouldn't work there. It's too short. It's just too short and perhaps not considered to be as big and serious enough as the actual concerti, but I think it's a better work than any of them. And my favorite performance, the one I would take to my cloister or wherever the heck I'd be going with my limited selection of recordings, is the good, fabulous, standard Rubinstein Reiner. Yeah, Rubinstein Reiner with the Chicago Symphony and living stereo. It's amazingly recorded and amazingly played. And, there have been so many recordings of this piece in the intervening decades. How many people even remember Artur Rubinstein? I mean, he was the man. Back when I was growing up, there were two pianists who you had to care about, Rubinstein and Horowitz. That was it. It was none of this, Richters and Arouse and all the other ones. And Argerich was up and coming, and she was like 12. It has become, the piano world particularly, has become such a free-for-all. Because, back in the day, there were a small stable of pianists recorded by major labels, and those were the ones that most of us paid attention to. Then, of course, there were always the piano crazies. And now the piano crazies are everywhere. I mean, in the internet is like, piano crazy net. That's what it's become. And these people have listened to everything by everybody 8 trillion times. And you'll see time and time again people who take these they were great, great artists on these major labels, make no mistake. And they will say things like, oh, Rubinstein couldn't play. He was a complete klutz, an artistic non-being. And Horowitz was loathsome and ridiculous. And most of these people are failed pianists themselves and have a certain personal, sort of animus when it comes to the way they evaluate these people. And then they'll find some totally obscure person who you've never heard of, and they will extol that as the absolute greatest performance of piece X in the world. That's a little harder with orchestral music because, of course, you need an orchestra and a conductor, and the comparison between the orchestral accompaniment and the conductor is definitely going to be a little bit more complicated than just doing the, just the pianist. I mean, if you're doing Chopin's first ballade, I mean, you got 13 trillion zillion pianists you can compare. And so if you choose, Aloysius Beck-Smith Gonzalez, as the greatest ever, then it's easy to find. It's easy for people to hear it. And it probably sounds like 10 billion other ones, but this person could hear what makes it so special and tries to convince everyone else. But Aloysius Beck-Smith Gonzalez is not likely to turn up with Reiner and the Chicago Symphony. So one of the wonderful things about this performance is that you've got Reiner in Chicago, because Reiner gives it a really steely, sharp-edged, fantastic accompaniment. And with Rubinstein, who was all elegance and warmth and virtuosity in the service of those qualities. He had a hedonistic relish in just making a beautiful sound and playing this music and welcoming you into it. Yeah, that was the kind of artist he was. And so the combination is just tremendous. And the wonderful thing about this particular disc, this living stereo one, is that it comes with Rubinstein's best Falla, Nights in the Gardens of Spain, with the San Francisco Symphony and Enrique Jorda, which is Jorda, whatever you call him. I guess you would call him Jorda. But, it's Enrique Jorda or Jorda. And he's in the U.S. It's Jorda. Let's make it easy. With Enrique Jorda, and it's really great. And Nights in the Gardens of Spain is one of those pieces, another piece that is so terribly underrated just because it's so beautiful. It's regarded as sort of it's a tone poem, right? It's a series of 3 tone poems, but it's a concerto. It's very, very difficult. People, it seems to just sort of, float along on its nocturnal enchantment. But boy, is it hard. And it's got to sound easy. You got to make it work. And it was a Rubinstein specialty. And this is just gorgeous. It's a wonderful performance. And you also get the Chopin Andante Spianato and Grande Polonaise as a not inconsiderable bonus, making all of this one of those discs that you must own, that I must own. When I want to hear the Paganini Rhapsody, I listen to this one or the Zoltán Kocis on Philips, now Decca. Those are basically my 2 faves. But my goodness, Rubinstein was such a great, great, great artist. And he made billions of records. And he doesn't deserve to be sort of forgotten. People's memories are so short. And especially these days, when younger listeners start to get into these, especially the kooky piano world, and there are so many people all screaming at you that this is the best and that's the best, and these, but there were great recordings made by these artists, and they were not considered great for no reason. Does that make sense? They were not considered great they were considered great for a very good reason. Let's do it positively, shall we? And this is just one of the linchpins of my collection in the more popular repertoire department, because everybody's got to have the Paganini Rhapsody. My goodness. And everybody really has to have Nights in the Gardens of Spain, too. The Andante Spianato I could live without. It's a good piece. Chopin, it's lovely. But, this is 2 absolute screaming masterpieces done fabulously and recorded fabulously, and that's good enough for me. This is in the permanent collection. Even though I'm in the overflow room here, this is the one I have in the overflow room. I have other versions of this in the Rubinstein box and in Brooklyn separately, and so don't worry. I probably own 4 or 5 of these suckers. That's how good it is. So keep on listening, folks. Thanks for joining me. Take care.